Imagine a civilization where people praised open-mindedness. That sounds good on the surface, right? But this society took it so far as to make doubt a virtue. When they created that new virtue, they created a new vice. They made certainty the pinnacle of arrogance. In this culture, people believed everything, except belief itself. This culture might sound familiar because this is the strange one in which we live. We no longer use thinking to lead us to truth. We use thinking to undermine the very idea that truth exists. This is just a little bit of what we are going to find out in Chapter 3 from G.K. Chesterton, the chapter called The Suicide of Thought. Here's the first paragraph. The phrases of the street are not only forcible, but subtle, or a figure of speech can often get into a crack too small for a definition. Phrases like put out or off color might have been coined by Mr. Henry James in an agony of verbal precision. And there is no more subtle truth than that of an everyday phrase about a man having his heart in the right place. It involves the idea of normal proportion. Not only does a certain function exist, but it is rightly related to other functions. Indeed, the negation of this phrase would describe with peculiar accuracy the somewhat morbid mercy and perverse tenderness of the most representative moderns. If, for instance, I had to describe with fairness the character of Mr. Bernard Shaw, I could not express myself more exactly than by saying that he has a heroically large and generous heart, but not a heart in the right place. And this is so of the typical society of our time. Chesterton is pointing out how everyday sayings can actually be very wise and precise. For example, saying that someone has their heart in the right place. This is not just a cute expression. It actually means something profound, that a person's feelings and values ought not only be good, but they ought to be balanced and properly directed. All that in a little phrase. The point is that it's not enough to have a big or kind heart. It has to be used in the right way and in the right situations. Chesterton says that there are a lot of modern people who have very good hearts, but they're in the wrong place. The modern world is not evil. In some ways, the modern world is far too good. It is full of wild and wasted virtues. When a religious scheme is shattered, as Christianity was shattered at the Reformation, it is not merely the vices that are let loose. The vices are indeed let loose, and they wander and do damage. But the virtues are let loose also, and the virtues wander more wildly, and the virtues do more terrible damage. The modern world is full of the old Christian virtues gone mad. The virtues have gone mad because they have been isolated from each other and are wandering alone. Thus, some scientists care for truth, and their truth is pitiless. Thus, some humanitarians only care for pity, and their pity, I am sorry to say, is often untruthful. For example, Mr. Blanchford attacks Christianity because he is mad on one Christian virtue, the merely mystical and almost irrational virtue of charity. He has a strange idea that he will make it easier to forgive sins by saying that there are no sins to forgive. Mr. Blanchford is not only an early Christian, he is the only early Christian who ought really to have been eaten by lions. For in his case, the pagan accusation is really true. His mercy would mean mere anarchy. He really is the enemy of the human race, because he is so human. As the other extreme, we may take the acrid realist, who has deliberately killed in himself all human pleasure in happy tales, or in the healing of the heart. Torquemada tortured people physically for the sake of moral truth. Zola tortured people morally for the sake of physical truth. But in Torquemada's time, there was at least a system that could to some extent make righteousness and peace kiss each other. Now they do not even bow. But a much stranger case than these two of truth and pity can be found in the remarkable case of the dislocation of humility. The problem with the world today isn't just that it's full of evil, and it is that. The bigger problem is that it's too full of good. So this is one of those Chesterton paradoxes. His actual point is that in our modern context, the virtues, the good things, the good behaviors, are all over the place. The problem is that they have become detached from each other and have thus become dangerous and feral. Dangerous because they are no longer working together or balanced. Here's a list of virtues gleaned from Christian writings over the ages. The thing about the virtues is that you have to live out all of them at the same time. If we go all in for just one and forget the rest, then there are all kinds of problems. Big evil. Justice, for instance. Justice is a virtue, and we should seek justice. This means that we should stand up against wrongdoing, we should root out corruption, and hold people accountable. This would be good, right? But if justice is pursued without mercy or humility or patience, it can easily become self-righteous and even cruel. We start publicly shaming others. We dig up years-old mistakes. We demand swift punishment. We refuse to forgive, even when someone sincerely repents. We end up thinking that the people who disagree with us are simply immoral, and we start cutting people off rather than listening. I know, this is hard to imagine. You see what happens? In the name of righteousness, we destroy reputations, divide communities, and even dehumanize others. We see this kind of thing all over social media, coming from Christians, doing terrible damage, working against the kingdom. Not good. It's hard to correct a self-righteous person, because they are quite right when they defend their cruelty by saying that they are only pursuing justice. That's exactly the problem. They are only pursuing justice. When we just do one virtue, we do as much evil that if we just straight up did evil, because the other virtues are not there to keep it in check. The key is we need to hold all the virtues, and then the goodness of each will complement and amplify the good of the others. In this paragraph, Chesterton used as examples the virtues of truth and mercy. But humility is an even better example of the terrible effects of disconnected virtues. It is only with one aspect of humility that we are here concerned. Humility was largely meant as a restraint upon the arrogance and infinity of the appetite of man. He was always outstripping his mercies with his own newly invented needs. His very power of enjoyment destroyed half his joys. By asking for pleasure, he lost the chief pleasure, for the chief pleasure is surprise. Hence it became evident that if a man would make his world large, he must always be making himself small. Even the haughty visions, the tall cities, and the toppling pinnacles are creations of humility. Giants that tread down forests like grass are the creations of humility. Towers that vanish upwards above the loneliest star are creations of humility. For towers are not tall unless we look up at them, and giants are not giant unless they are larger than we. All this gigantesque imagination, which is perhaps the mightiest of the pleasures of man, is at bottom entirely humble. It is impossible without humility to enjoy anything, even pride. You're probably developing a familiarity with Chesterton's style. He's very much into these inversions. He flips common notions so that they appear to be nonsense, and then he shows how the inversion is actually true, and that popular wisdom is foolishness. So here he goes again. In this paragraph, he explains the nature of humility and its relationship to human imagination and enjoyment. His explanation contains two paradoxes. The first is this: true humility actually enables rather than diminishes human greatness and pleasure. Humility is not just restraint on arrogance, it's also a restraint on appetite. We have a natural tendency to allow our desires, our appetites, to outpace what we actually have. We want more of everything all the time. This endless appetite becomes self-defeating because it destroys the very thing it wants. It destroys pleasure. If Socrates said this, he was absolutely right. He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have. Humility increases pleasure. It moderates desire so that we can be content. And when we are content, we can be delighted when we get something. Even something as small as a gift card, or when your partner says, "Let's go out for sushi." Surprise is the greatest pleasure. Chesterton's second paradox about humility is this: you need to make yourself small if you want to make your world large. In other words, a humble person experiences a larger, more magnificent, wonderful world than a person who approaches everything with arrogance and self-importance. He supports this metaphor with giants and towers, by which he means to say that our capacity to perceive and appreciate greatness, in whatever form it takes, depends entirely on our ability to see that these things are bigger than we are. I would not be so very impressed by the great cathedral in Cologne If I walked in and thought, I could build this, or even, I could build this in Minecraft. Chesterton goes so far as to say that you can't enjoy anything without humility. So humility is not one of the many virtues, but the main virtue for all our enjoyment and appreciation. Even the experience of legitimate pride in your own accomplishments requires humility, to recognize the difference between yourself and your achievements, and to appreciate the sources beyond oneself that made those achievements possible. Let's take a successful businessman, one who pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. He's proud that he's a self-made man. The problem is that no one is self-made. He did not single-handedly climb the ladder of success. He didn't build the roads that delivered his goods, or invent the internet that connected him to his customers. And he didn't educate himself in a vacuum. A self-made tech founder relies on decades of prior scientific research. A self-made farmer depends on generations of agricultural knowledge and government-funded projects like irrigation systems. And a self-made retailer might benefit from shipping networks and stable banking systems. No matter how successful a person is, they have lots of reasons to be humble. And with humility, they might even have a chance to enjoy their success. So this is how proper humility works. We don't have proper humility today. We have a lot of humility, but it's been isolated and twisted. But what we suffer from today is humility in the wrong place. Modesty has moved from the organ of ambition. Modesty has settled upon the organ of conviction, where it was never meant to be. A man was meant to be doubtful about himself, but undoubting about the truth. This has been exactly reversed. Nowadays, the part of a man that a man does assert is exactly the part he ought not to assert. Himself. The part he doubts is exactly the part he ought not to doubt. The divine reason. Huxley preached a humility content to learn from nature. But the new skeptic is so humble that he doubts that he can even learn. Thus, we should be wrong if we had said hastily that there is no humility typical of our time. The truth is that there is a real humility typical of our time, but it so happens that it is practically a more poisonous humility than the wildest prostrations of the ascetic. The old humility was a spur that prevented a man from stopping, not a nail in his boot that prevented him from going on. For the old humility made a man doubtful about his efforts, which might make him work harder. But the new humility makes a man doubtful about his aims, which will make him stop working altogether. Our humility is all screwed up. We've moved it. It used to moderate our ambition. It used to hold us back from thinking too much about ourselves. But now we use it to prevent us from thinking too much about our convictions. We apply our humility to the truth. Who said Chesterton is not relevant today? We used to live by our convictions, our core beliefs. They used to guide us through life. Our humility reminded us that we're not all wise and not all knowing, so we humbly submitted to our principles. But unmoored from the other virtues, humility has drifted. We no longer doubt ourselves, now we doubt our principles. We doubt the truth. You can see this everywhere today. We are very sure of ourselves, even aggressively so, but we are skeptical about everything else. Not just things like politicians and priests, but of really big things like meaning, purpose, identity, universal reason, transcendent truth, and objective morality. This new kind of humility is poisonous. The old humility used to drive us on when we may have doubted ourselves, but now we doubt our purposes and our convictions. Why even bother pursuing them? That's the first problem that comes with unmoored humility, the doubting of our convictions, but it gets worse. In the next paragraph, Chesterton transitions to an even bigger problem. At any street corner, we may meet a man who utters the frantic and blasphemous statement that he may be wrong. Every day one comes across somebody who says that of course his view may not be the right one. Of course his view must be the right one, or it is not his view. We are on the road to producing a race of men too mentally modest to believe in the multiplication table. We are in danger of seeing philosophers who doubt the law of gravity as being a mere fancy of their own. Scoffers of old time were too proud to be convinced, but these are too humble to be convinced. The meek do inherit the earth, but the modern skeptics are too meek even to claim their inheritance. It is exactly this kind of intellectual helplessness which is our second problem. We don't have people shouting on street corners anymore because people no longer have a truth to proclaim. And as a society, we no longer tolerate declarative statements. Oh, you can have an opinion, but you can't think it's the truth with a capital T. This is blatantly obvious in the ubiquitous use of the words, "I feel." I remember the first time I heard it in a class discussion on the novel 1984. It was about 15 years ago. A student said something like, "I feel Winston Smith is fatalistic." I interrupted the student with, "What? What did you say? You feel he's fatalistic?" I had never heard someone say that before. To say "I feel" instead of "I think." I've made a short video about what I think that means. It's in line with what Chesterton says here. When we say "I think," we are a lot closer to making a truth claim. But we no longer have enough confidence in the truth to say "I think." But we are confident in ourselves, though. If I feel something is true, it's true. For me, and that's all that matters. In essence, and this is important, we used to trust what was outside of us and mistrust what was inside. But now we doubt the external and trust the internal, which is, when we boil it all down, just our feeling. The last chapter has been concerned only with the fact of observation, that what peril of morbidity there is for man comes rather from his reason than his imagination. It was not meant to attack the authority of reason. Rather, it is the ultimate purpose to defend it, for it needs defense. The whole modern world is at war with reason, and the tower already reels. In this paragraph, Chesterton reminds us that he is not attacking reason, although it may have seemed like it in the last chapter. No, he's defending it, and it needs to be defended because it's being attacked. But religion is not its enemy, as many both then and now seem to think it is. Reason is being attacked from a whole other direction. The sages, it is often said, can see no answer to the riddle of religion. But the trouble with our sages is not that they cannot see the answer. It is that they cannot even see the riddle. They are like children, so stupid as to notice nothing paradoxical in the playful assertion that a door is not a door. The modern latitudinarians speak, for instance, about authority in religion not only as if there were no reason in it, but as if there had never been any reason for it. Apart from seeing its philosophical basis, they cannot even see its historical cause. Religious authority has often, doubtless, been oppressive and unreasonable, just as every legal system, and especially our present one, has been callous and full of cruel apathy. It is rational to attack the police. Nay, it is glorious. But the modern critics of religious authority are like men who should attack the police without ever having heard of burglars. For there is a great and possible peril to the human mind, a peril as practical as burglary. Against it, religious authority was reared, rightly or wrongly, as a barrier. And against it, something certainly must be reared as a barrier, if our race is to avoid ruin. Have you ever thought about that? That a door isn't actually a door? What we call the door is what blocks the opening in the wall. But the door is actually the space in the wall that we go through. Okay, now find a child and point to the thing that we call a door, and then tell them it actually isn't a door, and then watch them lose their mind. According to Chesterton, this is the same reaction you get from atheists when you tell them that religion isn't the enemy of reason and science. Chesterton argues that religion exists, and always has existed, to protect reason from another attack, from another direction. And if we scrap religion, another barrier of protection needs to be erected in its place. So what is the true enemy of reason? Where is the actual attack coming from? Here's the next paragraph. That peril is that the human intellect is free to destroy itself. Just as one generation could prevent the very existence of the next generation by all entering a monastery or jumping into the sea, so one set of thinkers can in some degree prevent further thinking by teaching the next generation that there is no validity in any human thought. It is idle to talk always of the alternative of reason and faith. Reason is itself a matter of faith. It is an act of faith to assert that our thoughts have any relation to reality at all. If you are merely a skeptic, you must sooner or later ask yourself the question, why should anything go right, even observation and deduction? Why should not good logic be as misleading as bad logic? They are both movements in the brain of a bewildered ape? The young skeptic says, I have a right to think for myself. But the old skeptic, the complete skeptic, says, I have no right to think for myself. I have no right to think at all. What threatens reason? A particular thought. Chesterton offers an analogy. The next generation can be destroyed by the current generation in several ways. 1, everyone can just stop having sex. Or 2, we could all just kill ourselves. If we did either of these things, the next generation would be destroyed. But Chesterton points out a third way. We could teach the next generation that there is no truth in human thought. We are a lot closer to this third reality today than we were even a decade ago. A lot closer. We live in a world of alternate facts and fake news. When we reject objective external reason, there's nothing to think. We just feel that it's true for me. And there's no counter-argument. Because you can't argue that a feeling is wrong. Chesterton continues to explain. There is a thought that stops thought. That is the only thought that ought to be stopped. That is the ultimate evil against which all religious authority was aimed. It only appears at the end of decadent ages like our own. And already Mr. H.G. Wells has raised its ruinous banner. He has written a delicate piece of skepticism called Doubts of the Instrument. In this he questions the brain itself and endeavors to remove all reality from all his own assertions, past, present, and to come. But it was always against this remote ruin that all the military systems in religion were originally ranked and ruled. The creeds and the crusades, the hierarchies and the horrible persecutions were not organized, as is ignorantly said, for the suppression of reason. They were organized for the difficult defense of reason. Man, by a blind instinct, knew that if once things were wildly questioned, reason could be questioned first. The authority of priests to absolve, the authority of popes to define the authority, even the inquisitors to terrify. These were all only dark defenses erected around one central authority, more undemonstrable, more supernatural than all, the authority of a man to think. We know now that this is so. We have no excuse for not knowing it. For we can hear skepticism crashing through the old ring of authorities, and at the same moment we can see reason swaying upon her throne. Insofar as religion is gone, reason is going. For they are both of the same primary and authoritative kind. They are both methods of proof which cannot themselves be proved. And in the act of destroying the idea of divine authority, we have largely destroyed the idea of that human authority by which we do a long division sum. With a long and sustained tug, we have attempted to pull the mitre off pontifical man, and his head has come off with it. The ultimate threat to reason, and therefore to the whole human race, is the thought that stops thought. This is not ordinary doubt or questioning. It's a radical skepticism that undermines that anything is true. And this undermines the very possibility of thinking itself. Chesterton continues on the theme that religion is not the enemy of reason. It is in fact its strongest ally. Because if God is not there, then thought isn't either. The rationalists never understood that when you try to knock the mitre off the bishop's head, you'll knock the head off with it. When you take down God, you take down reason. The loss of reason and the loss of Christianity are linked. The loss is proportional because they are the same kind of things. They are both unprovable proof. Without divine authority, we cannot have human authority. And we are not just talking being the boss kind of thing here. It's more like not being able to count on the idea that 2 + 2 make 4, and that it's wrong to throw acid in the face of a baby. Thanks, Orwell. Without divine authority, we no longer have the ability to think that anything is true with any kind of certainty. Lest this should be called loose assertion, it is perhaps desirable, though dull, to run rapidly through the chief modern fashions of thought, which have this effect of stopping thought itself. Materialism and the view of everything as personal illusion have some such effect. For if the mind is mechanical, thought cannot be very exciting. And if the cosmos is unreal, there is nothing to think about. But in these cases the effect is indirect and doubtful. In some cases it is direct and clear, notably in the case of what is generally called evolution. Some may suggest that he's got no leg to stand on with these claims. So, however tedious, he offers to run down some of the ways that our current thinking shuts down thought. And it's not tedious. He's not going to dig any deeper into the extreme ideas he's already covered, materialism and radical mysticism. He's going to get down to specifics, starting with evolution. And that will be the subject of our next video, where we continue our study of Chapter 3, The Suicide of Thought, from Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. Thank you, and we will see you there.